Awesome. Well, we've been talking about Galatians in services on Sunday, and I felt like I tried to fit in too much this Sunday. I don't know if you've ever done that in a message where you feel like, man, I just packed that in a little too tight, you know? So I wanted to just talk about one thing that came from Sunday, and that was, the book of Galatians is Paul basically defending the gospel, because early on, the gospel started off with mainly the Jews, and the Jews were mainly an ethnic group that had the laws of the Torah that they needed to fulfill and do. And after Jesus died and rose again from the dead, it was no longer, we're justified by the things that we're due. We're justified by our faith in Jesus Christ. And that's what the Galatians, this wonderful people that Paul spent 3 months with, really embraced. So Paul preached this gospel. Many of them came to Christ. It was a great thing. But there were also Jews that had come in from behind Paul and told them, Paul isn't teaching you the whole gospel. There's still more that you have to do. You still need to fulfill the laws and the practices of the Torah. You have to get circumcised, which was something that Paul just was like, you don't need to do all of that stuff at all. You just need to have faith in Jesus Christ. And in chapter 1, Paul just, he defends himself pretty well and talks about how he reserved his commissioning to go to the Gentiles, to go outside of the Jewish religion, because the gospel wasn't made for just one group of people. It was made for the whole world at the time, which included the Gentiles. And God basically gave him the gospel straight up. And then after that, he went to be with the disciples, where they commissioned him again and sent him out to minister to the Gentiles, again in agreement that they didn't need confirmation, or that they didn't need circumcision. But one example in Galatians chapter 2, 11 through 16, that I talked about was when Paul went to defend the gospel. He talks about this encounter that he had with the apostle Peter. And so what had happened was Peter went to Antioch to visit with the Gentile Christians, and he enjoyed a lot of really great time with them. But when the Judaizers, or the Jewish people that believed this, started to come into the picture and visit, he withdrew from the Gentiles and just ate with the Jews. And Paul was saying, you are leading people astray. You're basically saying that you're ashamed of this gospel that God gave us, that Jesus gave us, because now you're saying you don't want to hang out with the Gentiles, you want to just hang out with the Jews. Now, sitting down and having dinner with somebody was a big deal back then. And in fact, many times in the Gospels, Jesus was actually accused of eating with sinners and tax collectors. So if you ate with them, that meant you were one of them. And Jews and Gentiles were never really at the same level until after Jesus came and preached that real gospel. So Paul just goes straight at Peter and says, dude, you are being hypocritical, and not only that, you're actually dragged away some people there, because there were some Gentiles who saw this, and then they wanted to be circumcised because of this. And Paul's like, this is just not cool. So, I think that one of the things we can get from this is that, it's important that we be good examples, and that because what we do has a potential to lead people down the wrong path. Now, that doesn't mean that we should be overly concerned about that, but I think it's something that we really need to think about, that our lives do bear a testimony. And when Peter started to be fearful, and when Peter started to be ashamed of what he actually believed in, he led some people astray. And so we need to be careful as Christians that our testimony and our lives don't lead people up the wrong path. So I don't know, just something to be thinking about, that's for sure. I preached basically 3 topics within that, 3 subheadings, and we're not going to do all of that. If I couldn't get it done in a half an hour, I don't see how I can get it done in 10 minutes. Anything coming to mind when I was sharing that, Nigel?
Yeah, just to be aware of what you're doing. Be aware of who's watching. People are always watching you. If you're you don't have to be like an athlete. You can be a Christian that people are watching. If you're supposed to be this Christian person that you say you are, then people are going to watch you, and you have to be aware that they're watching you. Not that you're trying to put on a show. You're an audience for one. We get that.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be a hypocrite, like you said. You don't want to be like Peter. You don't want to do things that would be contradictory to the word, something that they could get you on or say, oh, I don't know about that, or I don't know about this. And they will, it can be a tough situation.
Absolutely.
And you're also going to be in situations where you have to defend the gospel, and the gospel is not always what the world believes.
Yeah.
And then it gets really dicey. I think dicey is the word, because you don't want to say like, oh, I believe. I'm like, I love the person where you're at, but I can't agree with this because this isn't the Bible.
Yeah.
And I believe the Bible, and hopefully they'll understand that. So you don't want to get like Peter. You don't want to. It's really easy in society today to do what Peter did.
Yeah.
It's very easy to, let's just go with the flow, and what everybody else is doing and what everybody else is saying is right, even though the Bible completely says it's wrong.
Absolutely.
You got to still stand up and say, you know what, I can't believe this. I'm not going to, like, I'm going to love you where you're at, but at the same time, I can't believe what you're believing.
Yeah.
And you got to be able to make that stand. If you can't make that... if you can't make that stand, then you're not who you say you are, and then you got to start checking yourself in the mirror. Am I the man in the mirror? Am I who God wants me to be? Am I representing Christ? Am I representing what He would want? So there's a lot there.
I'm looking at the man in the mirror.
Yeah, you got to be willing to make the change. If you,
I knew it's coming. I gave you an opportunity now to jump in there.
We got to make the change if we need to make a change. And hopefully it's a beautiful change and not an ugly, absolutely disgusting change.
That's great. I love it when Nigel goes into a Michael Jackson impersonation. I don't care where it is or what we're doing. So, all right, Nigel, we got a top 10 coming up in just a few minutes.